Well, next Monday night, it's not the easiest one to volunteer for straight after round one. Craig McRae and Ken Hinkley have committed to it, so they back their fortunes, and we'll see how that looks after round one. Did you ever across the 14 years could we just have an off-Broadway round one instead of going fronting up to Carlton in front of 90,000?
Last year, were we Friday?
You were night two.
Night two. Yeah. So sometimes it would be nice, especially when you're at the start of my career sort of thing, where I was like, oh, God, I'm up against the Blues sort of thing. But, look, it's just a great season opener. It's funny, I sort of sit there and, obviously our ground, watch the people come in, all that sort of stuff. It's an amazing feeling around Melbourne, I reckon, this week. It's just an outstanding weekend of footy.
The coaching landscape, so you're the longest serving, Damien. Do you feel like it changed at all with Brett Ratton and Ben Rutten and the way... So there's the pressure that builds across a year, but when you had such action from the clubs themselves rather than from the outside. Yeah,
it's a difficult one because obviously, we're speaking with the coach's hat on, and I think the one thing you can say, I look at Ben and I know Ben quite well. He's back at our club, and I look at him as a coach and I'm staggered because I see the strength of Ben and what he can do in a football program. But clubs make their decisions. I'm not privy to what their thought process was, but what I find alarming is the fact that you can sack a coach when he hasn't even served one day of his new contract. That to me is like it's probably speaking a little bit out of school, but I was sort of a bit taken aback by that. But the reality is we're probably in the business, we know it's cutthroat, and the reality is teams have got to win, they've got to, devise outcomes. So that's the challenge. The pressure of it is... It's inescapable, is it? Do you just give yourself over to the fact that the pressure around it?
Yeah, I think you do. I think if you asked anybody, it's a difficult one to be able to balance. We're always trying to find that balance of when do you switch off and when you switch on. But I don't think those thoughts ever leave you. You might be able to just calm it a little, but they're always present with you. And but I think there's some accepted parts of the job that that's what comes for it, and then there's the unaccepted parts of the job. And it's probably why we, from a coach association point of view, we talk about, well, we understand that there's some accepted parts and there's some other parts that we feel like, we can get some movement around some of the conditions that surround that. Because I don't think that's going to change. I don't think the bubble, I think the intensity is going to stay there. The demand to be able to win is only going to be increasing. So with that, you can cop a little bit of that, but you also realise that, okay, there's a bit of probably some things we need to consider in terms of the environment, the conditions that the coaches come with as well. Things like contracts and, exactly what that looks like. So that's probably a broader discussion for another day, but it's well and truly on the table for us.
There was an element of the season launch which clearly the game has come through COVID. It is in rude health financially, but none of that, well, not much of that has returned to the coaching ranks in the soft capital of football.
Yeah, and it will always be a pushing point for us to have more money in the game, to innovate, to develop coaches, to make sure our game stays at the very forefront of things. And I think that's the one thing that, through COVID, we probably did lose a little bit. We lost some outstanding coaches. What we're sort of hoping now with the growth of the women's game and, putting money back into the junior development pathways, that we can get all those coaches and, more importantly, the development of coaches back up to where we think it needs to be. Because I've been fortunate enough, as Michael would have been, we travel across the world and we see a lot of coaches, but I might be biased, but the reality is I think there's a lot of great coaches in our industry that are at the forefront of a lot of things.
Did you travel in the off-season?
No, didn't travel. Took the opportunity to be able to just stay at home. Spent last year away from my family for 6 months before they obviously moved over, so I thought it might be a wise decision to stick around and see them for a little while.
What about you?
Yeah, I took a bit of a sabbatical. I went away for about 6 weeks this time, which was great. So left the assistant coaches, which obviously got a great crew in charge.
Where'd you go?
Which is good. Went to the States. So got my fill of trip. NBA, NFL games and all that. Took a couple of visits along the way. But my sister lives in New York as well, so I caught up with her and her family, which is great.
She'd be your favourite sister, wouldn't he?
Yeah, living in New York. Very small apartment. Very small apartment.
Could you imagine a pre-season without formalised games and just getting into it a couple of weeks earlier?
Oh, I think you could envisage something that looked like maybe one game and then activating the season. You most definitely could. I think there comes a little bit of a caveat in that the pre-season length and what that looks like. It was somewhat shorter again. I don't think you want to shorten that and make that longer. That's all I'll say. So there is a balance. So if there is a need to bring it tighter, well then, the other part needs to change a little bit as well. So that's sort of something that just needs to be considered if we do go down that path.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was talking to Craig McRae about this because you get sick of training against yourself. So whether or not we could have a couple of weeks where, not necessarily play, but we could just train against each other for periods of time. Okay, we're going to do stoppages, we're going to do kick-outs, we're going to do zones, because the reality is we all know what each other are doing when we're playing against each other, which makes it incredibly challenging, and then you get one or two looks. So I'm not sure where it falls, but I think we can probably look at doing it maybe a little bit better.
Common sense was where it should fall.
What's common sense?
Training against, if the clubs want to train against each other, what's the issue with that?
Well,
I think it comes around with interstate, and having been an interstater for a long period of my time, now being in Melbourne, it'd be probably wrong of me not to represent them as well, because you've got 2 teams in every state, so their ability to be able to then go and travel and have other people join them is consideration, because otherwise you're just against one team. Whereas
I'm prepared to go to Gold Coast.
Yeah, so yeah,
we'll train up there.
And I'm happy to go there as well. So, and we'll do Richmond and Carlton.
And we'll do it up
Coast.
there.
So we'll just do it there, but that would be the one thing that just stops that from happening, just in an element of fear.
Yeah, that's fair too.
Good luck for Thursday night. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having